Bitcoin is too volatile and it is a gamble. What do you think about this statement? Is that true or is that false? Is it too volatile? Is it a gamble?
Yeah, it's hard to say, okay, it's right or wrong, or good or bad, if you want to value it, right? How I see things is, okay, let's first put it down into what usually is considered. Okay, usually the setup is, okay, we have a lot of price fluctuation since it's insecure. And the whole financial system is based on the assumption that you can measure risk by price change, which is a false assumption because it is a shortfall of many other risks. For instance, default risk, counterparty risk, some like protocol regime shifts, right? Exogenic shocks, for instance, as well. It's not only like the price risk or price change risk, to be precise. So and if you measure only the price change, and if you consider that as your major risk indicator, yeah, then you would consider Bitcoin as too volatile. This is the raw conclusion. My thinking comes from a different angle here. I perceive Bitcoin as a rather relevant savings tool than like an investment tool. Okay, so obviously volatility also helps you in your portfolio if you say, okay, I want to calculate a standard Markowitz-based portfolio theory approach. This volatility, which is not correlated to other main assets and asset classes, this helps you, yes, on the one hand side. But if you leave this traditional finance world, I come from the perspective that I say I rather have an asset that fluctuates in price but appreciates in value over time than the other way around, which would be having a currency that is stable nominal, like it remains €1 or $1, and like decreasing in purchasing power over time. Yeah? So which is better? You decide. You have more purchasing power in the end because it's scarce, or less purchasing power because it's absolutely not scarce. Yeah, and if you decide for the first one, and you want to have appreciating value, you want to have like more purchasing power, not less, then the answer is for most of the Bitcoiners that they say, I want an appreciating asset, even if you have some price fluctuations.
Yeah, coming to the next point, which is also related to that, because there is still some volatility. If it's a bug or a feature, everybody can decide themselves. Is it too volatile for everyday transactions, for example? Because Bitcoin was once communicated as a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Do you see that coming true, or what do you think?
So there's two aspects, the volatility aspect and then the medium of exchange aspect.
Okay.
Let me quickly answer the first part for the volatility. If you measure everything in fiat, then of course you can't use it as a medium of exchange because you are used to that the value is not changing, right? This is something very interesting to consider when you measure everything in euro or dollar. Obviously everything else is fluctuating. But think about it from a different angle. If you would measure everything from a gold perspective, because you probably, or let's assume you hypothetically would buy everything and pay everything from a gold perspective, obviously the same applies. That the gold price in fiat, measured in euro, dollar, is fluctuating a lot. It's changing or deviating a lot in this case. So we have also high or quite high volatility. Not that high in Bitcoin, it's even higher, of course. But the idea is the same because you still measure in another system.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you measure in another system, obviously you're still in that old system, and in that old system it doesn't make sense to use the new system.
So we are still in the fiat system, right?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay.
Most people are, yeah.
And so do you think it makes sense for everyday transactions, knowing there's some need for conversion and maybe some price changes here and there?
So obviously Bitcoin adoption is not that far advanced so far. We are still early in this adoption. We're still the pre-Google, pre-Facebook, pre-iPhone in the internet area, it's still the same here, right? So obviously right now you can't use it from a very broad perspective because usually people don't accept Bitcoin transactions. But when you are interested in using it as from day-to-day basis, it actually works on the basis of a Lightning Network. And it's true that the white paper has not foreseen the Bitcoin white paper back in from 28. 28 was it released, 29 was the first Bitcoin transaction. And it has not foreseen Lightning, which came then 10 years, almost 10 years later. But the thing is that from that point of time, it is possible to do day-to-day transactions which are very fast. Like they're directly finite. They are cost only a couple of sats, which is friction of a cent. Typically have a couple of sats with me to, for instance, tip taxi drivers.
For small amounts.
Yeah,
So
like
you
small
use it
amounts.
as well.
Exactly like you use cash today. From that perspective, it is possible. And there are a couple of online shops where you can actually purchase and pay with Lightning. So this is already something we see today. This is not someday, maybe. This is already working today. So it's very common that, for instance, when you're at Bitcoin conferences, all the merchants around, not only at the conference itself, but all the merchants around adopt the Lightning payments. And people, obviously, usually Bitcoiners also have their credit card still with them. Yeah, obviously, because it's the old system. We're still in the old system, but it's possible to pay with Lightning, and people do that, despite the fact that they would rather spend their fiat instead of spending hard money in Bitcoin. Same when it comes to the spending. I think it was like 10,000 a Bitcoin, 12,000 Bitcoin for the Bitcoin pizza, basically. And because it was possible, right? It was this dude was fully aware that it doesn't make sense to do the transaction, but he wanted to test the system.
Yeah, is that one of the reasons people do it? They want to push the system and do it out of belief, or they do it because it makes sense for them?
No, in this case, when you have a credit card, you could easily pay with euro, of course, but it's much cheaper along the value chain, right? And usually also faster. You can argue about that. But typically when you have, let's talk pure financial figures here, right? So typically the merchant is reduced 1 to 2% of the whole turnover, the whole revenue here. And when you have a Lightning transaction, which is typically 10 or 20 sats, which you can calculate it, it's a friction of a cent. Okay. Usually, right? And it really makes sense for merchants to offer that payment channel, and also for you as a customer, it makes sense because it's super quick and fast.